Welcome to the Psychology World podcast. I'm Connor Whiteley, bringing you psychology news, articles, and other interesting psychology-related articles. Where I can find the podcast notes and more interesting psychology-related things, and you can get your free 8 psychology book box set at connorwhiteley.net. Now let's get on to the show.
Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 177 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley. And today's episode is on how can we combine ketamine with psychotherapy. So today's episode is an absolutely fascinating one, and to be honest, I actually prefer it a lot more to last week's episode because this is sort of a more holistic approach that combines both the biological and the psychological approaches treating the psychological conditions. So I found this such a brilliant, really interesting podcast episode. And if you're interested in psychopharmacology and clinical psychology, then you really are going to be in for a great treat today. And it is Saturday the 5th of November 2022 as I record this. So moving on to the psychology news section, we're reading from the British Psychological Society Research Digest, and there's some really good ones here today. So the first one is, we intuitively understand the meaning behind a touch to the arm. It's a common knowledge that we use more than speech to communicate. Our facial signals, hand gestures, and tone of voice can communicate everything from anger to surprise to love and joy. And now a new study in psychological science reveals something perhaps even more remarkable. Humans also have an intuitively and quantifiable language of social touch. So I won't go into the article any more than that, but I think that that's quite both unsurprising and quite surprising, because we know that touch can be a rather intimate thing in both the romantic sense and the friendship sense, but I would have expected that to be learned, so we would have learned it by seeing other people do it and seeing the reaction of the other person, just so we know that it's okay to do that in a friendship or a romantic setting. So the fact that we just know it intuitively is quite interesting, and I suppose that also raises a question about, well, why is it intuitive? Does this have some sort of evolutionary root, or is there another place in it entirely? And if it did have some sort of evolutionary root, then why did that help our species to survive, and why didn't natural selection wipe it out? So really interesting findings, a lot of even more interesting questions. So yeah, that's just such a great one. The second one is, heat waves are dangerous, yet media coverage still shows people having fun in the sun. During the summer months, images of crowded beaches swarming with people are regular features in the pages of newspapers. Such images normally make heat waves look good. Who wouldn't want to be basking in the sun with an ice cream? A new preprint on Soccer Gen finds that when heat waves happen across Europe, these kinds of images depicting fun in the sun are indeed prevalent in the media, and even when images do show how dangerous heat waves can be, people are largely absent effectively downplaying the seriousness impact of climate change on our future. So there's actually not a lot for me to actually say about this, except from I also want to add another slight facet to this argument, and I think it was definitely, I think there's definitely a political angle, and I won't go into the politics too much of this, but during the summer, the UK had its hottest temperatures on record though. So it was like 40 degrees in the UK, our infrastructure was buckling, there were tons of fires and everything else. And quite a few politicians turned around and said that the UK people just need to man up and basically just not take any notice of this because this is perfectly natural. And it was also the same day that there were all of these fires, tons of people were dying, and it was just like, really? Yeah, so I would say it's both the media and how they present these issues, and also politicians who represent these issues, and that all interacts to the downplaying of the seriousness of these effects. But yeah, I know COP27 is happening next week. And we seriously need something good to come out of that, because this will only continue to get worse. And that's what all the data suggests. And the last one is past experience of adversity can lead to feelings of guilt and more compassion for others. There are reasons to view guilt as a damaging emotion. It does not feel good. It's also a key feature in major depression and obsessive compulsive disorder. And when someone feels a personal guilt in relation to a trauma that they've suffered, such as abuse, they're more likely to develop symptoms of post-traumatic stress. However, recent research also shows that this is an emotion that can have upsides. Guilt is generally viewed as stemming from a belief that you have done something wrong, either morally or socially, and as a result causes harm to others. And there is work finding that people will make pro-social, unselfish choices to avoid feeling it. A new paper in Emotion identified another upside of guilt. Past work has found that people who have suffered more adversity feel more empathy and compassion for others in need. Now, Daniel Lim at Alfred University and David DeSeno at Northeast University find that feelings of guilt associated with personal feelings of past hardship and trauma are the key driver of this effect. So personally, I feel like this is actually quite a sort of well-timed one though, because of the economy just being the economy at at the moment, and us living in a cost of living crisis. So lots of people are facing adversity, and the charities are struggling, and everyone needs help. Well, because on the news I've seen more coverages of people donating to food banks, people donating a bit more to a charity, even though they are still being quite tiered, because of course not as many people are. Yeah, are though. I think it's quite interesting to see that even though we are in, I don't know, I'm sure there will be a historian in the future calling this dark time and a dark period, that people really are still being pro-social and there is a lot of a passion for other people. So very interesting, and I hope that this effect is a right, because if we can sort of harness guilt as a more positive emotion, then that does have the potential to help a lot of people. So I hope you enjoy the psychology news section. So let's move on to the personal update. So we're moving on to the personal update. This week has been absolutely brilliant, if not a little longer, because this is the first full week of us doing 6 above distance for our study, and so much has and also hasn't gone wrong though, because things haven't been re-accorded. I've made data transfer file errors which has led to other problems. We've had EEG problems and participants not showing up, so us having to reschedule them just so we don't lose them. So it's been a lot of fun, a lot of chaos, but I've had a blast. I really, really have though. Well, and the reason why I am actually telling you all of this is that in case there are any funny project students or people working on their dissertation, or to be honest, younger years, just have fun with it, just go with the flow, try and do the best you possibly can. You will make mistakes, that is just human nature, but if you do make a mistake, of course, try and solve it yourself first of all, and then call your supervisor. And yeah, it is honestly just really, really fun though, and the participants are great. And something that I'm actually quite surprised about is how badly these first and these secondary students actually want to take part in our study. A study though. So because they want it, and to be honest, because they want the credits and they want to get paid, most importantly, they really are being really flexible. Where if something has gone wrong, and they're just being really nice about it, which to be honest, I guess shouldn't surprise me. But students are just great though. So lots of fun, lots of experiments stuff, and lots of coursework at the moment. Yes, I'm just doing a piece of coursework today for for a presentation on how force of gravity impacts our cognition. So that is actually a lot more interesting than it actually sounds though, but that I will cover next year at some point in a book or on a podcast. And as always, I always love to hear your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So you can always email me, connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. You can always leave a comment and share us at connorwhiteley.net/podcast. And you can always tweet me on Twitter at sci-fi-whiteley. I always love to hear from all of you because it really helps make the podcast feel more like a conversation. And to be honest, if you actually want to get my personal opinions on different bits, then definitely check me out on Twitter, because this week I was commenting on quite a lot of stuff there when giving my own opinions. For example, the new One Division spin-off, I was commenting on that though, because I don't like One Division. I think the program looks so weird, but because Joe Locke's in the spin-off, I'm probably gonna watch it. And then I was commenting on some other bits and pieces that were pieces that was if you want to see some of my wider opinions in addition to some psychology opinions, then definitely check me out on Twitter. And you can also leave your comment on the Facebook post at Connor Wiley Psychology Author. And today's episode has been sponsored by Biological Psychology 3rd edition. So the reason why this book is actually a great sponsor for today's episode is that there's an entire section of the book that focuses on how different drugs affect the body. For example, cocaine, heroin, ketamine, and a bunch of other really interesting drugs because they all have a very different impact on the body, and because it impacts us from a biological point of view, it also impacts our behaviour. So it's quite interesting to see the interaction between it. And as you'll see in the content part of today's episode, we're also going to talk about the nervous system, the role of the hormones, neurons, and neurotransmitters. So, but this great, really easy to understand book really does help you to sort of build upon what we've learned in today's episode, and it's always written in my engaging and really easy to understand tone. So that is Biological Psychology, available from all major ebook retailers, and you can get the paperback and the hardback versions from Amazon, your local bookstore or local library if you request it. But if you didn't want to buy a book, but you still wanted to give the podcast a bit of one-time support, then you can have Buy Me a Coffee at buymeacoffee.com/ConnorWhiteley. So now the personal update's done, let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So we're moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be talking about how can psychotherapy be combined with ketamine. So this is just such it's a sort of episode that I would never think about naturally, but because of the research that I found and some other things, I thought, yeah, I was instantly hooked on this a really good episode. So hopefully you'll enjoy it. And because I sort of did an introduction earlier, and because there's quite a few things there to get to, well, I'm actually just going to crack on with today's episode. How can psychotherapy be combined with ketamine? I just wanted to say up front, like last week, I am not for or against this new approach at this moment in time though, and of course I am far from recommending it, and believe me, that's really true. Well, we are all just learning about it, and I'll share my thoughts, feelings, and opinions on the approach throughout the episode. Therefore, whilst the research isn't conclusive on the effectiveness of ketamine combined with psychotherapy to treat mental health conditions, there is a growing body of literature showing that ketamine can be a useful tool for treating a lot of psychological conditions. Burdenstein, 2021. As well as ketamine, a derivative of ketamine, is what's most commonly used, and even the USA's Food and Drug Administration has signed it off as a treatment for different conditions. In addition, research shows that ketamine treatments are most effective when therapists combine them with a course of psychotherapy and draw on the psychological approaches. Personally, I really prefer this line of treatment compared to neuromodulation from last week because this feels a lot more holistic and it effectively combines the biological and the psychological approaches to a treatment. But it does raise the question of why is psychotherapy reported to be effective with ketamine? In order to answer these questions, we need to look at the benefits of ketamine and what it does to the human body to fully understand how ketamine can optimize treatment outcomes for the client. 3 benefits of ketamine for psychotherapy. Firstly, ketamine engages the neurotransmitter glutamate and GABA, due to N-methyl deaspartate, also known as NMDA, is a glutamate receptor, and ketamine effectively blocks NMDA receptors from action. So this allows more glutamate to be present in the synapse of a client. Rwanda and all 2005. Therefore, with a glutamate being an excitatory neurotransmitter and GABA being an inhibitory neurotransmitter, the client's other neurotransmitters can reach an optimal homeostasis. Then this leads to a reduction in depression and anxiety symptoms as it decreases hyperarousal as well as rumination. As a result, from a psychotherapist's perspective, this allows them to focus on the underlying events that are causing the client's affective and cognitive dysfunction, with a client that is calmer and more able to focus constructively on finding better ways to effectively manage the condition. Personally, I think this is a very interesting idea and a concept, because whilst this will not be right for everyone, I fully admit that, and to be honest, I do sort of question the idea of giving a clients drugs that to make them calmer, but some people will need this. For example, I was in a lecture this week, and the clinical psychologist said sometimes that there's no point in giving someone therapy if they aren't going to be able to focus. And to be honest, I would actually go into that case because how the lecturer described it was actually quite funny. But the problem is that because it's to do with poo, I don't want to turn off too many people from the podcast. Therefore, yes, if we need to give drugs to the client to help them focus on the psychotherapy, then this is something that we do have to do. Ketamine causes an inferior dissociative state. Secondly, we need to look at how ketamine causes a dissociative state and why this is potentially useful in psychotherapy, since many traumatic conditions, dissociation can be a debilitating chronic problem that prevents clients from being able to even acknowledge that they have a condition in the first place. And as we know, if a person doesn't acknowledge that they have a condition first of all, then they have next to no hope of resolving the associated difficulties. Nonetheless, with ketamine, this causes the dissociative state that it induces to be temporary, and ideally this should or will occur in a controlled setting with the psychotherapeutic staff actually engaged in the process. The reasoning behind this is that the dissociative state can give the client a brief break from the underlying emotional dysfunction, and this allows the therapist with the client to address the originating difficulties, overall leading to potential long-term relief. Afterwards, when the dissociative state is over, the psychotherapist then helps the client cognitively realign with a greater understanding of the formative difficulties that have led to the mental health condition. In other words, the ketamine allows the client to take a break from their emotional and other difficulties, and this allows them to really focus on the psychotherapy without having to deal with or be potentially overwhelmed with the difficulties at the same time. Then, when the stage is over, the therapist helps the client with their newfound knowledge to deal with the returned, and I say in air quotes, difficulties that they didn't feel were during the dissociative state. Ketamine starts neural pathway formation. Finally, this rather new finding about ketamine is very exciting for psychologists because it differentiates ketamine from a lot of other monomate-based psychotropic medications. For example, ketamine is different from SSRIs, with the shown disappointing results. Rush and Therese, 2018. Also, what with a ketamine blocking NMDA receptors, glutamate presence is increased, which mediates synaptic plasticity. Further case in 2005. And that basically just means that the adaptability of the synapse in the nervous system. Therefore, by taking advantage of the new neural pathways created by the synaptic plasticity, psychologists can work with their clients to treat positive thought processes as well as memories to mitigate the effects of the previous negative feedback loops and rumination. Meaning that this can literally give the client a new opportunity to find relief and a more positive outlook on the whole, and as a future or current psychologist, that is exactly what we want. Also, it is very much worth noting that if a psychologist isn't used, or at least present to help the client create more positive outlook during this increased synaptic plasticity process, this does lead to even worse outcomes for the client, because it is that positivity that's the key here. Conclusion. And I will admit this is a bit of a longer one, but it is packed with really good information. So, at the end of today's episode, we can conclude that there is good research that by taking advantage of the benefits provided to us by ketamine, psychologists can work with our clients to achieve three main benefits, as we've learned about today, resulting in the client being helped to deal well with the psychological distress and trauma through short-lived and removed, also known as dissociative states. Additionally, we know that the oppression and anxiety can be calmed and its symptoms decrease by ketamine effects on both GABA and glutamate, enabling a more logical examination of the causes of the mental health condition without the client's difficulties overshadowing and making it difficult to constructively engage with the therapy. As well as ketamine helps the new neural pathways to be formed and hopefully break the previous negative cycles, as well as rumination. Furthermore, these are three benefits of ketamine, all were thankfully reduced the client's sympathetic stress response mechanisms, including the presence of cytokine and the inflammation it causes, which further improve their psychological and their physiological well-being. 2022. However, we have to take note here that this is a relatively new treatment, and that we seriously need more longitudinal studies before we can even begin to understand the long-term impacts of ketamine and psychological therapy. Since, like any medication, ketamine does have its side effects, which we aren't going to go into today, but it still has some. Yet, the current research and even the practitioner reports do provide a promising glimpse of hope for the use of ketamine and psychotherapy in the future, and how they potentially benefit the treatment of people with treatment-resistant forms of depression, suicidal idealization, anxiety, alcohol abuse, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Personally, I am very interested in this approach to treatment, because it is great that we are still finding ways to combine the biological and the psychological approaches in treating mental health conditions. Because a condition never has a single cause, so neither can its treatment. Of course, a lot of our clients will not need ketamine in the slightest, but I can understand why ketamine will definitely be useful for clients that are resistant to treatment and have severe symptoms that can make psychotherapy difficult to engage in. This is an area I will certainly be interested in the future. But until then, we have to keep researching, learning, and enjoying all the amazing possibilities heading our way. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode and that you got something out of it. I know that I definitely did, and I really do enjoy looking at these new approaches that could possibly come to us in the future. So if you know someone who would enjoy today's episode, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when wonderful people help us spread the word about the podcast. And if you want to learn more about this, then definitely check out Biological Psychology, available in all the usual places. But if you do want to buy a book, be someone to give the podcast a bit of one-time support, then you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Connor Whiteley. Have a great day, everyone. I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see the show notes, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. And if you want a free 8-book psychology box set, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.